He said it softly. That was the worst part. I know what you've been doing. The door to his study closed behind me, with a sound like a verdict. Walnut shelves climbed the walls. Perfect rows of spines catching the low amber light. This desk was immaculate. Pen out of placenot, a paper misaligned. I froze, my gloves still on, my cart parked outside like an alibi I hadn't rehearsed. I didn't turn around, not yet. For 3 years, I'd cleaned this room at night, dusting, wealth polishing, power breathing, in the smell of old money and older paper. For 3 years, I'd followed orders, except for the books. I swallowed and waited for him to continue. He didn't. Silence was his favorite weapon, used it the way surgeons use scalpels. I finally faced him. The billionaire Maradrian Cade sat behind his desk, hands folded, eyes calm, curious, not angry. That's when I knew this wasn't about breaking rules. It was about something far more personal. I didn't start reorganizing his library to be clever. I started because I was angry. Anger is quieter than people think. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it tidies. 3 years earlier, I hadn't been a cleaner. I'd been a systems archivist. Metadata, classification, private collection side built libraries for people who didn't want anyone to know what they owned or why. Loved the logic of it, the order, their honesty of systems that didn't pretend to care about status. Then my marriage collapsed in the most efficient way possible. My wife didn't cheat. That would have been messy, emotional, human. She replaced me. One meeting with her firm's board, in quiet conversation, I wasn't invited into. One decision explained afterward as strategic alignment. I was redundant, not because I lacked skill, but because I lacked leverage. She kept the apartment, the friends, the future we'd outlined in pencil and called permanent. I kept my integrity. And AR sum no one wanted to read. Cade Holdings did. They didn't hire me for my brain. They hired me because I didn't matter. Night clean, a restricted floors, non-disclosure, thicker than the books I'd soon be dusting. That was the first betrayal. The second came when I realized why I'd been placed in the library. Cade's collection wasn't random. It was curated with intent. First editions, marginally assigned confessions, masquerading as memoirs. Books are mirrors. People tell you who they are by how they shelve them. At first, I just noticed inconsistencies. Philosophy shelved by color, economics by height, power disguised as aesthetics. He wanted to look cultured, not understood. So I fixed it. One shelf at a time, slowly, carefully, I reorganized his library by intellectual lineage, influence, cause and effect. Plato next to Machiavelli, not because they agreed, but because they argued across centuries. Adam Smith beside modern deregulation manifestos, not because they belonged, but because the gap between them mattered. I wasn't vandalizing. I was revealing. Every night, I made the library more honest. And every morning, it stayed that way. That's when I knew he was watching. The signs came quietly. A chair moved closer to a shelf I'd adjusted. A book returned to its exact position after I'd tested a theory. A new acquisition slid perfectly into the logic I'd imposed without resistance. He never corrected me. He studied me, the way powerful men do when they're deciding whether something is a threat or a tool. I should have stopped. Instead, I went further. I began leaving messages. Not notes patterns. A sequence of titles, spelling words only someone fluent in systems would notice. TRUST, CONTROL, BETRAYAL. I wasn't trying to provoke him. I was trying to see how far he'd let me go. Turns out, very far. You reorganize my books? He said finally. Yes. No apology, no denial. I told my staff not to touch the shelves. I didn't, I said. I corrected them. A corner of his mouth lifted, not a Smalaya calibration. Why? Because my wife chose leverage over loyalty. Because men like you mistake silence for ignorance. Because order is a language, and you were lying in it. I didn't say any of that. I thought the collection deserved coherence. He stood and walked past me, fingers trailing spines I'd realigned. You think you understand me, he said. I think I understand systems, I replied. People reveal themselves through them. He stopped at a shelf I'd reworked last week, corporate biographies, adjacent to legal case study spower, next to consequence. Do you know, he said, why I let you continue? I waited. Because I was looking for someone who noticed patterns, someone who didn't ask permission. He turned. And someone who understood betrayal. The word landed perfectly between us. He knew. That's when the real betrayal surfaced. He offered me a job. Not a promotion, a partnership. Quiet off the books information architecture, private intelligence would organize his acquisitions, his leverage, his secrets. The salary was obscene. The timing wasn't coincidence. He'd known about my past before I reorganized a single shelf. He'd placed me there deliberately. I wasn't an accident. I was bait. I accepted. That was my mistake. Working for Cade taught me something essential. Power doesn't fear morality. It fears documentation. I saw everything shell companies, folded into charities, feeding political action, feeding regulatory blind spots. Nothing illegal on paper. Everything illegal in effect. I built systems to track it a la belt cross-referenced elegant. And while I worked, I planned. Not emotionally, strategically. Because betrayal isn't personal when it's structural. It's procedural. Cade never lied to me, that's how he justified it. He simply never told me the whole truth. Like the clause buried in my contract, the one that made my work proprietary, me methods, his intellectual property. The moment I tried to leave, I'd leave empty-handed. Replaceable. Disposable. Cleaned up. I'd been here before. This time, I prepared. I built redundancy. Copies within copy systems that required my absence to activate. I left trails only I could see, digital marginalia like the notes in his books. When he moved against me, as men like him always do, it happened quietly. Access revoked. Accounts frozen. Security escort. You're no longer necessary, he said, calm as ever. I know, I replied. That's when the plan executed. The regulators didn't come knocking. They received invitations. Journalists didn't get leaks. They got libraries. Every story, map every connection, footnoted every denial, preempted by evidence. I didn't expose him. I organized him. The world saw what he was, because it was finally shelved correctly. By the time he realized what I'd done, his study was empty. Books, CZ assets, frozen alleys silent. He called me once. I answered. You betrayed me, he said. No, I replied, he corrected you. Silence. Then laughter, real this time. You learned from me. No, I said, I survived you. I hung up. Now, I work where order matters again. Public institutions, transparent systems. At night sometimes, I think about that library, about how close power keeps its truths, about how fragile it all is when someone decides to rearrange the shelves. Betrayal didn't break me. It taught me structure. And structure, when done right, is justice. Because nothing terrifies the powerful more than being understood. And nothing satisfies me more than putting things exactly where they belong.